Hey fight fans, Dr. Don 4 here. Let's take a few minutes and let's talk about literature review. Every paper you write, be it a small paper for a response to a problem in a course or to a master's thesis or dissertation, needs to have some form of literature review. And the better the paper, like a thesis or dissertation, then the more extensive the literature review has to be. This is no easy task. Learning how to do a literature review is something that you don't do in the civilian world for the most part. So it's an academic exercise, but it really has a lot of value. Basically, a literature review is looking for studies that support or dispute the research that you've planned. So if you decide you want to write about leader-member exchange and how it relates to job satisfaction in your organization, then you need a literature review on leader-member exchange, job satisfaction, and then some literature that combines both of them together. And it doesn't have to be, if you're in a hospital and you're writing about this, then it can just be on leader member exchange and job satisfaction. It does not have to be a hospital only because you're studying the variables. The issue is a different story. You determine the issue you're going to study, and you want to find out if leaders and members, how followers and leaders get along in your organization, how it affects their job satisfaction, then you have to have a background about your organization. But when you start reviewing the literature to see what studies are out there, you're trying to determine how past researchers have approached how leaders and followers get along, leader-member exchange, and job satisfaction as they fit into the organization. So let's kick back and relax and let's talk about a literature review. So what is it? It's a comprehensive analysis of literature related to your research problem. In other words, the literature review is a critical look at the existing research that is significant to the work that you are carrying out. So it's a critical look at the research in your area. Now here's some sources for literature. Journals are usually very good sources. What you're trying to find, you hear this term in academia, peer-reviewed, refereed journal. You're looking for journal articles that have been through a process. You don't want journals that just take every paper that's sent to them. You want journals who you send the paper in for publication, they review it to see if it fits in the criteria that they're looking for, then they send it out to a team, 3, 4, 5 members of experts in that field. They read each paper critically and they compare it to other papers that they have published in the past or that they're considering publication right now. And then if you get selected, you're considered a article that helps the field of study and would therefore help you in your literature review. So journals are good. You go to the library, if it says journal, look in the front, it's more than likely a peer-reviewed journal. Obviously, the Wall Street Journal is not a peer-reviewed journal. Books can be good, but be very careful with books. Books are something, if you have Abraham Maslow's book where he developed the hierarchy of needs, it's a good book. But anybody can write anything in a book. So you have to be very careful what you take from books and use in scholarly literature. Conference proceedings is very seldom good. There are some conferences now that are going to a peer-reviewed system that makes them a little bit better. But right now, a lot of times if I'm going to present at a conference, I send them my abstract to see if and they determine if they want me to present. And then they select it and they put my paper automatically in the conference proceeding, which means I could write anything. It may be valid, it may not be valid. So conference proceedings are a little scary. Government and corporate reports are usually good. You want to check the source. You want to determine how they did the research. But especially if you're writing a report where you need historical data, a lot of times you can get that from government and corporate reports. Theses and dissertations are also good. Dissertation is an awesome place for you to look for a good framework, find literature in the area. If you can find a dissertation on the topic that you're researching, the literature review, if it's current, will be a great addition to your research in the beginning. There's nothing wrong with you looking at the same articles that other researchers have looked at. In fact, when you pull down and you determine the best articles in your field that you're studying, your topic, you will find, and when you look at the references, that a lot of people are citing a lot of the same people. These are the folks who've risen to the top, that those researching believe what they say has relevance. And so that's your goal in life. Write a paper and have it cited 10,000 times because someone thought that you did something valuable to the field. Newspapers and magazines are very seldom, if ever, good. Anything can be put into a newspaper and magazine, and the internet is just plain scary. There is occasionally some valuable items on the internet, but be very leery. Really do some research as to where it came from. And journals, government corporate reports, theses, and dissertations are usually your best sources. So why write a literature review at all? Well, it's not necessarily just a simple summary of individuals' work. You evaluate relevant research. You're looking at your topic and you want to see who else out there is looking at the same topic. More than likely it'll be a different control group, maybe even a different form of measurement, but you learn a lot from your literature review. You read these articles. If we were in a dissertation phase, we would have 3 or 4 years. You would pick your topic, liter member exchange, job satisfaction, and you would pull everything you could find, and you would read, and you would read, and you would eliminate, and soon you would have 100 articles that were cream of the crop, deemed premier literature in that field. Well, we don't have time normally in a 7, 8, 9 week class. And so you have to get to the bottom as fast as you can. So you're looking for relevant research that will help you. You want to show the relationships between the different work. You want to find articles. Some will say job satisfaction means this, this, and this. And others will say yes, but this is an important element. You want to find those, and you want to show how it relates to your work, because that's the whole purpose. Don't just put a square peg in a round hole. You need to find literature that helps support or dispute your research. So you have to answer some questions. Why write a literature review? What do we already know about the topic? If we already know everything, you're wasting your time. But there's a lot of topics out there that can still use a lot more research. What are the key characteristics of the key concepts, or the main factors or variables? You're looking to determine if you have a morale problem in your organization. And maybe you've determined that leader member exchange, job satisfaction, and org commitment are 3 variables that you should look at. So you need to determine that, because those are the areas that you're going to concentrate in to write your literature review. Not the organization. You're not writing a literature review about ABC Hospital. You're writing it about leader member exchange, job satisfaction, and org commitment. What are the existing theories out there that might support what you're doing? Herzberg 3-factor theories, where you look at satisfiers or dissatisfiers, might be a good example when you're looking at job satisfaction and org commitment. Don't get too wrapped up around theory, but read. As you're reading, find what researchers are citing as the theory that supports what they're trying to do. What are the inconsistencies or shortcomings out there in the field? Usually every paper ends with future research, and yours will too, because as you're researching your topic, you're going to come across areas that you want to go to, but you're going to realize it broadens your research too much, or it narrows it too much. So when you get to the end, you're going to say, hey, I've come to these conclusions, but if I had more time, I would look at this, this, and this. Okay? So you might say, I've looked at leader member exchange and how it affects job satisfaction, organization, or commitment. But then I might say at the end, I really wish I had more time where I could look at turnover and how the effects of leader member exchange, job satisfaction, or commitment affect turnover. So those are that's a pretty good example. What views need to be tested further? What evidence is lacking? What are we missing out there? There's a lot of new topics out there. Drones are huge in the aviation field, and we don't know a whole lot about them right now, especially how to be safe with drones. So these are new areas that's begging to be researched. Why study the problem at all? If it's been beat to death like pilot pay, you might want to leave it alone. What contribution can the present study be expected to make? What is your research going to do? First of all, to your organization, is it going to help or hinder, or what will it do for the field of study? And what research designs or methods seem unsatisfactory? As you're reading, you're going to see the framework that every one of these researchers use for their paper. That's so valuable because it'll help you form your framework. How are you going to, the methodology you're going to use? How are you going to test it? What is the best statistical test to test it, to test your particular topic? Okay? And you find all that, and you'll find some that you say, wow, that would never work in my organization. Put it aside. Okay? Remember with a purpose. You should answer these 10 questions, and as you're reading, you need to synchronize your work and remember. You're putting it in a chronological order and a way to help you. Read with a purpose. Don't, first of all, you put in job satisfaction, you're going to pull up 190,000 articles. So first of all, you have to use the library system very smartly and narrow that down, but you're still going to end up with 600 or 700 articles even when you narrow it down. So you need to be able to get in there and look at the abstract real fast, look at the research questions, look at the hypothesis, look at briefly look at how they tested it in their framework, and throw it away if it's not good for your study, and set it aside to be read if it is, and then read with a purpose. An annotated bibliography is a great way to read. You read the study and you condense it down into how it's going to pertain to your paper in one paragraph, 100 to 200 words. Then when you finish with your annotated bibliographies on the research you found, you can just put them right into your paper. Works very well. Write with a purpose. Sit down and show the relationships already done by the researchers and your own. A literature review should be linked to your research question. It has to be. If I evaluate your literature review, I'm going to cut and paste right at the top your research questions. And if you're not, and your hypothesis, and if you're not speaking to those, if you haven't conducted a literature review on the variables that you say that you want to study, you haven't conducted a proper literature review. It should address both pros and cons. Don't use the literature review to justify what you think. You remember, you're like a CSI agent on CSI Las Vegas. It looks like you know exactly who committed the crime, but follow the evidence, okay? Don't get caught up in your own bias. Describe the possible causes and contributors to the problem. Support the rationale for your study. Should be properly cited reference. Always use the APA cited references using peer-reviewed sources like we talked about earlier. Should be organized so that it's in a cohesive, well-sequenced manner. Should include the method used to conduct your research, for example, descriptors, databases, etc., and a summary. Some of the traps you need to avoid. You never want to try to read everything. That will cause you heartache and you'll go blind. You can't do that. You do just like I said earlier. You look at the article real fast, you pull out key elements, you put it in a pile to read or put it in a pile that you don't want to. Reading but not writing. You want to conduct an annotated bibliography while you're writing so that you're ready to go, and not keeping your reference material, bibliographic information. If you write this paper and then you want to go back and put your in-text citations and put your references below, you are in big trouble. You're going to find yourself making lots of mistakes, maybe getting accused of plagiarism. Keep that information as you go. That's why the annotated bibliography is so important. And so make sure you keep that. And if you use the library system like you should be, when you pull down the article, they're great today. You've got to look around the page and you'll see a word that says cite, C-I-T-E. Click on it and it'll let you cite in any type of format you're doing. We use APA, but there's other formats there also. Group information together similarly. Show relationships between your work. These are good habits. Indicate the position of the work and the history of the area. Move from the general discussion to specific as soon as possible. And a picture's worth 1,000 words. So a conceptual diagram that lays out your variables is very valuable in your research. A successful literature review will have a breadth of resources, it has a number of citations, not just a few, a variety of resources cited, not just one journal, depth of understanding is demonstrated through citing historical and theoretical background. It'll be scholarly, okay? Primary resources when possible, empirical research when possible, always peer reviewed, and you find as many seminal or landmark studies you can. Those folks who have become the gurus in your particular topic or what you're seeking. It must be current to today's world, and it must be relevant to what you're trying to study. So real fast, I want to bring up this is an article. I use it in a lot of papers I cite because I like it. It's a very good article because it really lays out the variables. And the title itself says relationships among service orientation, job satisfaction, and org commitment. Those are your variables right there in the international tourist hotel industry. This is only minutely about the international tourist hotel industry. This is about learning how service orientation, job satisfaction, or commitment could be used by you to improve your workplace. Okay, so they have a very good abstract, tells you what they're doing. They have an introduction that explains a lot about the tourist industry and why this is an issue in the first place. And you notice they use some literature to support their stance in the introduction. So that's another topic, but don't forget that. And then they get to their formal literature review. They write a little paragraph lead in. They start with their variables. They talk about service orientation. They talk about job satisfaction, they talk about org commitment, and then they tie all of them together. You notice they don't have literature on the tourist industry. Not important in this concept because this is what they're trying to do. Now, if you look right here, service orientation, they found an article by Kim et al., which means Kim and a lot of people. It's common in academia. And they came up with these 5 items that help support their concept of service orientation. And so this would be an excellent annotated bibliography. If you were reading this article from Kim et al. And thought, well, wow, that's going to help me in my paper, this is something you might write up and set aside till you're ready to use it. But you go down through the literature review, then they also found some articles from Hogan and a little bit from Lytle. Not a bunch. They found something, in this case, they're defining service orientation. That's fine. Then they found some from Snyder and Brown and a point that they made that supports their research. And then Dean Hart and a bunch of people presented 3 dimensions of service orientation, okay? And so this all supports what they're trying to do with service orientation. Then they found job satisfaction. They only wrote 1 paragraph. That's not my choice, but that will work. They found some information by Hipcock where he defined it, and then they went into Vroom defined it a little bit different. Then they talked about some points that Smith made and a whole bunch of people. They come up with Porter and Lauer, a few another good point, Locke, and then down here Walker has some good points, and Arnett and a bunch of people have good points. So you see they have one paragraph, a big one by the way, but it's powerful. You know, it really talks about job satisfaction, and it condensed. If it's a dissertation, you might have 5 pages worth of literature, but for a small paper, this is fine. Org commitment, they found Mode, who's one of the seminal thinkers in organizational commitment, and you'll see him cited. Here he is with McDade, I'm sorry, Porter and a bunch of people. Michael Porter is a guru in everything. He's a Harvard professor that famous for the Porter's 5 forces model, but he does a lot of strategic initiatives, and he's very well published. Cantor has some comments on org commitment. Meyer and Allen, other gurus, seminal thinkers, and then Lee. And so then the last, to finish up the literature review, they tied them all together. Again, nothing about the tourist industry. This is about service orientation, job satisfaction, org commitment, and how it affects the task at hand. And see, they have some good literature. This is great for a small paper. Again, you would have pages and pages if you were writing a dissertation. And they go through the hypothesis, and so this is a great article. I think it's great for teaching purposes, and it's a very well written article. So This is Dr. Don 4. This is a literature review in a nutshell. I wanted to take some time to help you as you jump into this journey because the literature review is critical for your success in any paper you write, any paper. And you should also cite references whenever you just answer a simple question in a discussion board. Okay? Makes you a better student and really prepares you for the workplace. So, Dr. Don 4, thank you very much, and I'm out.